Admiral Thora Patel stood at the United Earth Defense Command's central viewport, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic display of approaching alien vessels. The Krovax war fleet hung in high orbit like a constellation of daggers. 37 ships of gleaming obsidian, each one capable of reducing a continent to ash. "They're hailing us again, Admiral," Lieutenant Rivera announced, his fingers hovering over the communications array. "Same message as before." Thora nodded slowly, her silver hair catching the light. "Play it." The harsh, metallic voice of High Commander Xerxon filled the command center. "Humans of Earth, your species has been marked for assessment. Our scans show potential, but potential alone is insufficient. Prove your worth through combat, or be relegated to protectorate status under Krovax dominion. You have one planetary rotation to prepare your forces." The message ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The assembled officers looked to Thora, waiting for direction. In her 30 years of service, she'd never faced a situation quite like this. The Krovax Empire was legendary among the handful of alien species humanity had contacted, ancient, powerful, and obsessed with martial prowess. But where others saw only threat, Thora saw opportunity. "Lieutenant Rivera, open a channel," she commanded. "I want to speak with High Commander Xerxon directly." "Admiral," General Harrison protested, "they've made their intentions clear. We should be mobilizing our defenses, not." "Trust me, Marcus." Thora's dark eyes sparkled with determination. "I think I know how to speak their language." The view screen flickered to life, revealing High Commander Xerxon. The Krovax leader was impressive. 3 meters tall, with iridescent scales and ceremonial armor that seemed to absorb light. Multiple sets of yellow eyes fixed on Thora with predatory intensity. "You wish to surrender already?" Xerxon's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Actually," Thora replied, keeping her voice steady, "I wish to propose an alternative assessment, one that will truly test both our species." Xerxon's head tilted slightly. "Explain." "You seek to evaluate our worth through combat," Thora said, "but that tests only one facet of a species' potential. We propose a series of 5 trials, each designed to challenge different aspects of our capabilities: strategy, endurance, innovation, unity, and yes, combat too. You would turn assessment into competition." Xerxon's tone was unreadable. "We would turn it into something meaningful," Thora countered. "If you win the majority of trials, Earth accepts protectorate status. But if we win, the Krovax Empire acknowledges humanity as equals and opens diplomatic relations." The command center held its breath as Xerxon considered. Finally, the alien commander spoke. "Your proposal intrigues me, human. But what prevents us from simply taking what we want by force?" Thora smiled. "Because then you'd never know if you could have beaten us fairly. That doubt would taint any victory. And from what we know of the Krovax Empire, you value honor as much as strength." A low rumble emanated from Xerxon, something between a growl and a laugh. "You understand us better than expected, Admiral." "Very well. We accept your terms. Prepare your champions. The trials begin at dawn." As the transmission ended, General Harrison approached Thora. "That was either brilliant or insane. You really think we can win?" Thora watched the Krovax ships through the viewport, their dark hulls reflecting Earth's light. They're stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced. But they've never lost a war, never had to adapt or innovate. That's our advantage. She turned to address the command center. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't our military might or our technology. It's our ability to face impossible odds and find a way forward. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and our own destructive nature. We've turned setbacks into opportunities, weaknesses into strengths." Her voice carried across the silent room. "The Krovax think they're here to test us, but we're about to show them something they've never seen before, a species that turned trial and error into an art form. Contact our best and brightest. We have work to do." As the command center erupted into activity, Thora allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow, they would begin writing a new chapter in human history, one trial at a time. The Global Defense Initiative's Strategic Command Center had been transformed overnight. What was once a military planning room now housed a massive holographic arena, its crystalline projectors casting an ethereal blue glow across the gathered observers. Dr. Rin Nakamura adjusted her neural interface band, dark eyes focused on the complex simulation space floating before her. As Earth's foremost expert in tactical AI and game theory, she had been chosen to face the Krovax's strategic master, War Sage Krell. "Remember," Admiral Patel's voice came through her earpiece, "they're expecting us to think like soldiers. Don't give them what they expect." Rin nodded, watching as War Sage Krell entered the chamber. The Krovax strategist moved with fluid grace despite his massive frame, his ceremonial armor adorned with symbols representing hundreds of victories. His multiple eyes scanned the room, finally settling on Rin with what seemed like amusement. "This is your champion." Krell's translator rendered his clicks and whistles into English. "For a trial of military strategy." "The rules were clear," Admiral Patel responded. "Each side chooses their best strategist for a simulated conflict. Dr. Nakamura is ours." The simulation parameters materialized in the air between them. Two civilizations on opposite sides of a resource-rich star system, each with identical starting forces and objectives. Victory would come through either total military dominance or achieving economic superiority. Krell took his position. "I have commanded fleets that burned worlds. Little human, I have orchestrated campaigns that span decades. This will be a swift lesson in humility." Rin smiled softly, her fingers already dancing through the holographic interface. "Perhaps we'll both learn something today." The simulation began. Krell's forces moved with textbook precision, deploying in classic Krovax battle formations. His strategies were perfected over millennia of warfare, efficient, aggressive, and utterly predictable. But Rin didn't counter with military movements. Instead, her forces split into small civilian-led groups, establishing mining operations on seemingly worthless asteroids, building research stations in apparent random patterns. "You scatter like prey," Krell observed, his forces advancing methodically. "Surrender now, and I will make this quick." Rin remained silent, her eyes darting between multiple data streams. Where Krell saw military objectives, she saw interconnected systems. Each apparently random move was part of a larger pattern, invisible unless you knew where to look. The first hint of her strategy revealed itself 3 hours in. What seemed like vulnerable civilian operations suddenly linked together, forming an economic network that generated resources faster than Krell's military could capture them. Research stations began producing technological innovations at an unprecedented rate. Krell's forces found themselves facing not armies, but evolution itself. Every tactical problem he solved spawned 2 more. His perfect formations meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight on his terms. "Impossible," he growled, watching as his carefully constructed offensive crumbled against waves of automated defenders, each generation more advanced than the last. "This is not warfare." "No," Rin agreed, her voice calm. "This is adaptation. You fight wars, War Sage Krell. We solve problems." The simulation ended with Rin's civilization achieving both victory conditions, economic superiority through innovation, and military dominance through automated defense systems that had evolved beyond anything in Krell's experience. The chamber fell silent. Krell stared at the final statistics, his massive frame rigid with shock. Finally, he turned to Rin and did something that made the other Krovax observers hiss in surprise. He lowered his head in respect. "I have fought 10,000 battles," he said slowly, "all using principles perfected over eons. But you created new principles in mere hours. I do not understand." "Humanity's greatest strategic advantage," Rin explained, removing her neural interface, is that we never stopped learning how to learn. Every failure taught us something new. Every defeat showed us a different path. Admiral Patel stepped forward. That's one trial complete. High Commander Xerxen. Shall we proceed to the next? Xerxen's multiple eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Perhaps there is more to strength than we understood. Prepare your champion for the trial of spirit. They will need every advantage against what comes next. As the Krovax delegation departed, Admiral Patel approached Rin. That was brilliant, but you've also made them desperate. They won't underestimate us again. The Australian outback stretched endlessly beneath the morning sun, its red earth baking in the heat. A massive course had been carved through the landscape, 100 kilometers of natural and artificial obstacles designed to test the absolute limits of physical endurance. Captain James Okonjo stood at the starting line, his dark skin glistening with cooling gel, specially designed compression suit regulating his core temperature. As Kenya's champion ultramarathon runner and former Special Forces operator, he represented humanity's peak endurance capabilities. But even he felt a flutter of doubt as he observed his opponent. Warrior Prime Zaxthar of the Krovax towered beside him, 3 meters of evolved hunting perfection. The alien's respiratory system could process nitrogen as efficiently as oxygen, and its musculature could generate 10 times the force of a human's strongest effort. The rules are simple, Admiral Patel announced to the gathered crowds and hovering camera drones. First to complete the course wins. No weapons, no external assistance beyond the approved environmental gear. High Commander Xerxen's voice rumbled across the starting area. Your species shows courage, attempting to challenge us in physical combat. Courage, or foolishness. The starting signal flared. Zaxthar exploded forward with devastating speed, covering ground in enormous strides. Within minutes, the Krovax warrior was nearly a kilometer ahead, moving like a force of nature. James started at a measured pace, his breathing controlled and rhythmic. He could hear the worried murmurs from the human spectators, see the satisfied expressions of the Krovax observers. Let them think what they would. The first 20 kilometers were punishing. Zaxthar maintained his blistering pace, attacking each obstacle with raw power. James followed steadily, conserving energy, reading the terrain. Where the Krovax warrior smashed through barriers, James found efficient paths around them. At the 30-kilometer mark, the course entered the deep desert. The temperature soared past 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Zaxthar's pace began to falter ever so slightly. The Krovax's impressive biology, evolved for short bursts of overwhelming force, was meeting its match in the relentless Australian sun. Your champion slows, Admiral Patel observed quietly to Xerxen. Perhaps there are different kinds of strength. James maintained his pace, decades of training paying off as his body managed the heat through measured water consumption and optimal movement. He passed the halfway point when he caught his first glimpse of Zaxthar, the mighty warrior's strides no longer so confident. At kilometer 70, everything changed. Zaxthar's superior strength had become a liability, requiring massive amounts of energy to maintain. The Krovax warrior stumbled, caught himself, pressed on through sheer will. James, operating at the same steady pace he'd started with, passed his opponent. Impossible, Zaxthar growled, trying to match James's rhythm. Your species is physically inferior in every way. Maybe, James replied, his voice steady despite the exertion. But we've been running since we came down from the trees. Before we had weapons or tools, we ran our prey to exhaustion. It's not about being the strongest. It's about lasting the longest. The final kilometers were a lesson in contrasts. James pushed on, his form still efficient, while Zaxthar's legendary strength betrayed him. The Krovax warrior's biology, perfectly evolved for dominance, couldn't match humanity's adaptability. James crossed the finish line 4 hours after starting, his time impressive, but not extraordinary by human ultra-marathon standards. Zaxthar followed 20 minutes later, his proud bearing shaken by the experience. How? the Krovax warrior demanded, after his breathing stabilized. How can a physically weaker species triumph in a test of physical prowess? Admiral Patel stepped forward. Because humanity's greatest strength isn't in our muscles or our speed. It's in our inability to accept limitations. Every time someone told us something was impossible, we tried anyway. Every time nature set a boundary, we found a way around it. High Commander Xerxen studied James with new intensity. 2 trials, 2 victories, through methods we never conceived. Perhaps we have misunderstood what makes a species truly formidable. The trial of unity comes next, Admiral Patel reminded them. And for that, we'll show you something else you've never seen before, how humanity faces challenges together. The medical teams attended to both competitors. James caught snippets of conversation from the Krovax observers. They spoke in their own language, but their tone was clear. For the first time in their long history of martial excellence, they were beginning to question their understanding of strength. The sun set over the outback, painting the sky in fierce oranges and reds. Tomorrow would bring the 4th trial, and with it, a chance to demonstrate humanity's greatest power, our ability to work as one. The massive underwater facility off the coast of Japan gleamed like a pearl in the Pacific depths. Purpose-built for the 4th trial, it presented a challenge unlike anything either species had faced before, a simulated deep-sea crisis that would require perfect coordination to survive. Lieutenant Aisha Hassan stood with her team of 4, Dr. Viktor Petrov, a Russian marine engineer, Captain Isabella Torres, a deep-sea rescue specialist, Dr. Hideki Tanaka, an environmental systems expert, and Technical Sergeant Marcus Williams, a communications specialist. They represented 5 different nations, backgrounds, and specialties, united by a single purpose. The Krovax team, led by Elite Commander Krax, consisted of 5 warriors of identical rank and training, each one a paragon of their species' martial excellence. They stood in perfect formation, their specialized aquatic armor gleaming under the facility's lights. The parameters are set, Admiral Patel announced. Both teams will enter separate but identical sections of the facility. Your goal is to prevent a catastrophic collapse while navigating a series of escalating system failures. You have 3 hours. High Commander Xerxen's voice carried across the chamber. We fail to see the challenge. Our warriors are perfectly trained, each capable of handling any task. That's what we're counting on. Admiral Patel replied with a slight smile. The teams entered their respective sections. Almost immediately, the first crisis struck. Multiple hull breaches coupled with failing life support systems. The facility's AI began a countdown to total structural failure. The Krovax team moved with impressive coordination, each warrior attacking the problems with identical efficiency. But as the challenges grew more complex, their uniform approach became a liability. In the human section, a different dynamic emerged. Aisha's team split up, each member tackling problems that matched their expertise. Victor worked on structural integrity, while Isabella coordinated their movements. Hideki monitored environmental systems, as Marcus maintained their communication network. Aisha served as a floating support, filling gaps and coordinating their efforts. Second phase beginning. The facility AI announced. New complications arose. Power failures, toxic gas leaks, and system cascades that required simultaneous solutions across multiple areas. Through the observation feeds, the differences between the teams became stark. The Krovax warriors, despite their superior individual capabilities, struggled when faced with problems that required diverse approaches. Each one tried to be a perfect soldier, but sometimes the situation needed an engineer, a strategist, or a scientist. Pressure hull integrity at 40%, the AI warned. Multiple systems approaching critical failure. In the human section, Aisha's team adapted rapidly. When Victor couldn't reach a crucial repair point, Isabella used her rescue experience to create an alternative access route. When toxic gas threatened to overwhelm one section, Hideki reprogrammed environmental controls, while Marcus coordinated their movements through compromised communication systems. They are trading roles. Cirxon observed, watching the humans work, each one deferring to different leaders at different moments. That's how humanity survived and thrived, Admiral Patel explained. Not by creating perfect individuals, but by learning to combine our different strengths. We call it specialization and cooperation. The final phase brought the greatest challenge, a cascade failure that required actions in 5 different locations simultaneously. The Krovax team, trying to maintain their rigid hierarchy, couldn't coordinate fast enough. Their section began to fail. But in the human section, something remarkable happened. Without a word, each team member took their position. They didn't need to be told what to do because they trusted each other's expertise. When Hideki's initial solution failed, the team instantly adapted, building on each other's ideas until they found a way through. Simulation complete, the AI announced. Human section. Stabilized. Krovax section. Critical failure. As the teams emerged, the contrast was telling. The Krovax warriors stood rigidly, their perfect discipline now seeming more like a limitation. Aisha's team moved with the easy familiarity of people who had learned to trust and rely on each other. How can such imperfect beings achieve perfect coordination? Elite Commander Krax demanded. Because we're not trying to be perfect, Aisha replied. We're trying to be complete. Each of us has strengths and weaknesses. Together, we cover each other's gaps. That's humanity's real power. We don't need everyone to be the best at everything. We just need everyone to be their best at something. High Commander Cirxon approached Admiral Patel, his massive frame somehow less intimidating than before. 3 trials. 3 lessons we never expected. Your species. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Your species forces us to question principles we have held for millennia. That's what we do best, Admiral Patel said. Question. Adapt. Improve. And now, 1 trial remains. As the teams departed, the facility's lights dimmed, reflecting off the dark Pacific waters. Tomorrow would bring the final trial, and with it, a chance to prove that humanity's greatest victories don't come from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into allies. The orbital station above Earth gleamed like a silver star, chosen as the arena for the final decisive trial. But Admiral Patel had saved humanity's most audacious gambit for last. Commander Raj Sharma stood in the central chamber, unarmed, facing the towering figure of War Master Vexkar, the Krovax's supreme warrior. The assembled dignitaries from both species watched with a mixture of anticipation and confusion. There were no visible weapons, no obvious arena, no clear signs of what this final challenge would entail. Explain this, High Commander Cirxon demanded. Where is the combat arena? Where are the weapons? Admiral Patel stepped forward, her silver hair catching the starlight streaming through the station's windows. The final trial isn't about combat at all. It's about courage, specifically, the courage to break from tradition, when tradition no longer serves. She gestured to a holographic display that sprang to life between the 2 champions. It showed a star system on the edge of Krovax space, where a massive stellar anomaly was forming. Our deep space sensors detected this 3 days ago, Patel continued. A quantum filament tear, growing exponentially. Our calculations show it will reach critical mass within a month, threatening 3 inhabited Krovax worlds. Cirxon's multiple eyes narrowed. You dare to spy on our territory. We dare to care about life, regardless of species. Raj spoke up, his voice calm but firm. Commander, your empire's strength has always been in warfare, not quantum mechanics. You don't have the scientific expertise to handle this kind of threat. But we do. The display shifted, showing complex calculations and proposed containment methods. Dr. Nakamura's strategic algorithms, combined with decades of Earth's quantum research, offered a solution. But it would require both species working together in ways neither had imagined. The final trial is this, Admiral Patel announced. Not to prove superiority, but to prove wisdom. We offer our help freely, asking only for cooperation and the chance to forge a different kind of relationship between our species. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Krovax observers shifted uncomfortably. Accepting help from a lesser species went against millennia of tradition. War Master Vexkar looked to his commander, awaiting direction. "And if we refuse?" Sirkson asked quietly. "Then we help anyway," Raj replied simply. "Because that's who we are. We've spent our history learning that true strength isn't about domination. It's about lifting others up, about finding ways to turn enemies into allies." Vexkar stepped forward, towering over Raj. "You would help those who came to conquer you. The universe is too vast and too dangerous for any species to face it alone," Raj said. "Every trial we've shown you, strategy, endurance, cooperation, they're all tools we developed because we had to overcome our own divisions first. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting itself before we learned there are better ways to prove strength." The chamber erupted in discussion as the Krovax delegation debated among themselves. Raj stood calmly, watching the stars through the station's windows. Earth hummed below them, beautiful and fragile, a reminder of everything at stake. Finally, High Commander Sirkson raised his hand for silence. He approached Admiral Patel slowly, his expression unreadable. "In all our history," he began, "no species has ever surprised us as much as yours. We came to test your worth through combat, and instead, you have tested our understanding of worth itself." He turned to address both delegations. "The quantum threat is real. Our own scientists confirmed it after reviewing your data. We could refuse your help, maintain our pride, and watch millions die. Or we could choose to evolve, as you humans have taught us to do." Sirkson did something unprecedented. He removed his ceremonial armor, revealing the scourged scales beneath. "The trial of combat is canceled. Instead, we accept your challenge of cooperation. Show us how to save our worlds, and in return, we offer not subjugation, but alliance." The chamber exploded in cheers from both species. As the diplomats rushed to draft agreements, Raj found himself standing beside Vexkar at the window. "You could have just let us face the quantum tear alone," the Krovax warrior mused. "We would have been weakened, perhaps destroyed. Instead, you chose to help. Why?" Raj smiled, watching shuttles begin to launch as the joint scientific mission took shape. "Because every time humanity faced extinction, from ice ages to our own nuclear weapons, we survived by learning to work together. We learned that victory doesn't always wear armor or carry weapons. Sometimes it looks like a helping hand, extended even to those who once meant you harm." Far below, Earth continued its eternal dance around the sun, but something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. The Krovax Empire, ancient and mighty, had learned something new from a young species they had come to test. And humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning battles, but from making them unnecessary. As the first joint human-Krovax scientific teams began their work, Admiral Patel made a final entry in her log. "Today, humanity rewrote galactic history not through force of arms, but through force of example. Perhaps that was our destiny all along, not to conquer the stars, but to help them shine brighter."